Adventurous kids, explore with education and learning what a wild life is in the Everglades. I want to explore the Museum of Discovering Science. What plants do butterflies like? I want to know about Key West adventurous kids, learning and fun. Adventurous kids!
Today I'm going to tell you about the Transcontinental Railroad. Transcontinental means going across a continent. In the US, that would mean from coast to coast. The most famous Transcontinental Railroad in the United States was built between 1863 and 1869. It connected the eastern and western parts of the country. Before this, traveling west was very long, expensive, hard, and dangerous. People could travel by wagon train or stagecoach overland, by ship around South America, or by ship to Panama, where they took a railroad to that country's western coast and boarded a second ship to go back north to the United States. The first talk of a transcontinental railroad started around 1830. One of the first promoters of the railroad was a merchant named Asa Whitney. Asa tried hard for many years to get Congress to pass an act to build the railroad, but failed. However, in the 1860s, Theodore Judah began to lobby for a railroad. He surveyed the Sierra Nevada mountains and found a pass where the railroad could be built. But surveyor Greenville Dodge found what he believed to be the easiest route. It followed the Platte River Valley in Nebraska. There are two main routes along which people wanted the first railroad to be built. One route was called the Central Route. It followed much the same route as the Oregon Trail. It would begin in Omaha, Nebraska, and end up in Sacramento, California. The other route was the Southern Route. This route would stretch across Texas, New Mexico, and end up in Los Angeles, California. The Central Route was eventually chosen by Congress. President Abraham Lincoln signed the Pacific Railway Act in 1862. This act set aside land and money to build a transcontinental railroad. It also appointed the Central Pacific and the Union Pacific Railroads to perform the work. The Union Pacific Railroad was tasked with building westward from Omaha, Nebraska. The Central Pacific Railroad started from Sacramento, California, and worked eastward. A group of California businessmen, later called the Big Four, Leland Stanford, Charles Crocker, Carlos P. Huntington, and Mark Hopkins, controlled the Central Pacific. Thomas C. Durtant oversaw the Union Pacific at the time. Building the railroad was tough, hard work. Weather conditions were especially tough in the mountains during the winter. A lot of times, the only way to travel over the mountains was to go through the mountains by blasting a tunnel. The Central Pacific Railroad had to blast 15 tunnels through the Sierra Nevada mountains. The longest tunnel was 1,659 feet long. It took a long time to build the tunnels. They were able to blast around 1 foot per day on average. Once past the mountains, the Central Pacific workers picked up speed. While the Central Pacific Railroad had to deal with mountains and snow, the Union Pacific Railroad was challenged by Native Americans' raids. As the Native Americans came to realize the threat to the way of life that the Iron House was going to bring, they began to raid the railroad work sites. Also, a lot of the land that was granted to the railroad by the government was actually Native American land. The majority of the workers on the Union Pacific Railroad were Irish laborers, many who had served in both the Union and the Confederate armies. In Utah, a lot of the track was built by Mormon workers. Most of the Central Pacific Railroad was built by Chinese immigrants. By early 1869, the two railroads came close to meeting up with each other. In April, officials designed Parliamentary Summit in northern Utah as the connection spot. On May 10, the two railroads met, with Stanford and Durant driving in the last spikes to join the tracks. This final spike was called the Golden Spike or the Final Spike. You can see it today at Stanford University in California. Telegraph messages were sent out to all parts of the country announcing the feat. The total length of the first Transcontinental Railroad was 1,776 miles. The Central Pacific laid about 700 miles of the track, while the Union Pacific finished some 1,100 miles. The completed Transcontinental Railroad was variously called the Pacific Railroad or the Overland Route. The Transcontinental Railroad reduced the travel time between the east and west coasts from as long as 6 months to under 2 weeks. It not only allowed more ease of movement for people, but also for freight and mail. As goods were distributed more quickly, demand increased and the U.S. economy expanded. To make train schedules work, standard time zones were created. However, the Transcontinental Railroad helped to bring about the end of the traditional way of life for many Native Americans. By the end of the 1800s, the United States had 5 transcontinental rail lines. The Canadian Pacific Railway was finished in 1885. It connected eastern Canada to the Pacific coast. The completion of these rail lines opened vast regions of the continent to town development, farming, and trade. Thanks for watching this episode of Adventurous Kids.
What did you learn today?
Adventurous Kids!
Adventurous Kids!
What was the most interesting fact?
Adventurous Kids!
Adventurous Kids!